So welcome, everybody. We have certain traditions in this lecture. If you haven't been here, I will teach you about our traditions. First of all, you know, this lectures are associated with a lecture series, a class at Harvard. It's a science and cooking class, and so we may see equations. And if we do, what do we do? I see only a small fraction know that we have to do that. Everybody has to do that if you happen to see an equation. Also, just to encourage people to come to these public lectures, we have a quiz about the last lecture, and we give out prizes. Where did our prizes go? Oh, can we show a prize? So it's an apron with all the equations on it. Okay, so those of you who were here at the last lecture will have a little bit of a head start, but anybody can answer, and just raise your hand as quickly as you can, and if I see you first, I'll ask you. So, from before, why does sparkling water taste so different from normal water? Oh, come on, that's easy. Why? What does it do? Anybody else? I'm going to be tough. It's carbon dioxide, so what? Makes it acidic. Ah, he wins. It's acidic. So what did we learn? Do you know what the pH is? Oh. It's 4.5. And it turns out that all good foods are much more likely to be acidic than they are to be basic or even neutral. And so that's why. So, sorry, you missed the main point. Okay, Harold talked about tea, and we had black tea and green tea and oolong tea. Very good. Two lessons. If you're closer to the front, it helps. And if you come to the next lecture, you'll be all set for this quiz. Let me hand it back to Pia.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So I thought we should go into this lecture. So very soon I'm going to introduce Lidia, but I thought we should just start pondering a few questions that we can keep with us as we go through the lecture. And the question I want to ask is, what is cooking? So when you cook, what is the definition of cooking? Are there any ideas? No aprons. Well, actually, we have one apron left. Any ideas? What is the definition of cooking? All the way in the back. Altering raw ingredients with heat. Good. Any other ideas? Yeah. Altering the chemical structure of the ingredients. Anything else? Yeah. Okay, make the food edible. I like that. So if you go to the Oxford English Dictionary, it says to prepare or make ready food. So that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying. And then it mentions the heat. It says to make fit for eating by due application of heat, as by boiling, baking, roasting, broiling, etc. So I would probably argue that cooking is a very broad term, and how you define it is kind of a philosophical question. But the fact that you apply heat, I think that is one of the things that comes foremost to mind for a lot of us, that you somehow add heat in some way. So that I want you to keep in mind. And the next question to ask is, well, how much heat do you have to add to food to cook it? Like, when is it cooked? And I would say that this depends on, so you want to add some heat to food, some Q. That's barely an equation, but thank you. there's an equal sign missing equation. Good. So I would say, so if something is very big, you're going to have to add a lot of heat, right? If something is very small, you're going to have to add less heat. So I would say that the mass is important, right? And then I would say, well, it kind of depends on what kind of food it is. Let's say you're cooking pasta, or let's say you're just cooking a marshmallow. They have very different textures, so maybe you have to add different amounts of heat to the food to make it cooked. And for that, in science, we have something called the specific heat, which is CP. See, you'll get tired doing this. And then I would say, well, it depends on how hot you want to make the food. So if you just want to heat it up a little bit and make it lukewarm, you don't have to add as much heat. But if you want to make it really sizzling hot, then you have to add a lot of heat. So it depends on the temperature difference, right? And now, if I put all of this together, I get the equation of the week. Now you clap. So this is the equation of the week, and if you were a college student in this class, you would now go into our cooking lab, and you would explore this question by cooking pasta. So the dish of the week is pasta puttanesca, and we would ask all kinds of questions about pasta. Pasta seems to be one of those really basic things that most people have cooked, right? But there are all kinds of questions around it. So, do you add salt to your water or not? How much salt do you add? Do you add the pasta? So how many here waits until the water is boiling until you add the pasta? Who does not? Yeah? Why? Right? I mean, it's just a question. It's just a question. But questions you can find the answer to. So this lab was actually born out of an article by Harold McGee, who was here last week. Who was here last week? Wonderful. So then you listened to Harold talk about tea. But this is an article from 2009 in the New York Times where he asks the question, this is another question related. So for example, when you cook pasta, do you have a lot of water? Do you fill the pot? Who just fills the pot with a lot of water? I do. Who is no, I just try to take the bare minimum water? Okay, so we're a bit more divided. So Harold asked this question, and he said, let's see up here. Why boil so much more water than pasta actually absorbs, only to pour it down the drain? Couldn't we just cook pasta just as well with much less water, less energy? Another question quickly followed. If we could, what would the defenders of Italian tradition say? So next he goes on, and I described my method in email messages to two of this country's best-known advocates of Italian cuisine. Lidia Bastianich told me, my grandmother would have thought of this idea surely as blasphemous. But I think it's curious. And so she went into her kitchen and she actually did this experiment. And she finally concluded that the cold water pasta, so if you add the pasta to the cold water and then you wait for the whole thing to start to boil, you boil it that way, it had lost some of its nutty flavor, right? So she thinks, yes, I think it's good and doable to reduce the cooking water by a third from 6 quarts to 4 quarts. But please, put la pasta in boiling water. So there you go. So with this, and I'll show you this too, because this is what we do in this class. Here, for those of you who are really into the structure of pasta, this is a graph of what pasta looks like in a CEM microscope. This is dried pasta. This is pasta that has been cooked, hydrated, rehydrated in 20 degrees, and this is 80 degrees. So you can actually, on the microscopic scale, see a difference. And I'd like to argue that maybe Chef Lidia could taste that difference with her mouth. So with this, and here's what we were doing live. So with this, I'm going to soon introduce Lidia. So this is very fitting in a number of ways. For those of you who attended this lecture series last fall. Italy had just opened in Boston. We were all really excited, and Mario Batali came and gave the last lecture. Was anyone here? Yeah. So I thought it would be fitting now to start off this lecture series with Lidia Bastianich, another co-founder of Italy, also the person behind Lidia's Kitchen, for Lidia, Del Posto, many other restaurants. And the other reason this is very fitting is because what we're doing here is we're applying heat, right? In the first lecture by Harold McGee and Dave Arnold, Harold talked about tea, right? Very simple manipulation of water to make a delicious drink. Dave Arnold talked about sparkling water, also very sort of simple manipulation of water to make it delicious. Here, we're gonna add heat. And some more things. But essentially, we're now adding heat to our food, and we're doing it to a kind of basic material, in a way, just to rice grains. So as scientists, we like to study simple systems, and I'd like to propose that we're kind of doing that here, although as you'll see, it's actually very complicated. So with this, please welcome Lidia Bastianich.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Pia. Grazie for the invitation. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure being here with you. Where are you two guys? Come on out. So, we have, there's here the executive chef of Italy down at the Peru Center, and his assistant, Daniel. And we chose to make risotto today. And risotto is all about the technique. But, she said, they told me, well, you could cook, you can talk about it, you can make tastings. And I says, how am I going to have all these people look at me and not give them a tasting? So we have the two of them, which they're mixing a pot, so there'll be a tasting for everybody, because I think... Because I think, yes, you listen to the technique and to the whys and to the hows and answer the questions. But at some point, you got to record it. You got to record the flavor, the textures, and all of that. So we made sure that you had that. So, risotto. Risotto, what is risotto? Risotto is an Italian technique of cooking rice. And it is a technique, it's considered an Italian culinary sort of sequence. It's a primo. A primo is usually a starchy dish. So you have the antipasto, then you have your primos. It could be pasta, it could be soup, and it could be risotto. And it is very much appreciated by the Italians. And yes, it's in the ingredients, but there's so much in the technique of cooking this dish. And once you have that technique down, and by today you can go home and make any flavored risotto. And I'm pretty sure of that, so pay attention. But let's talk about rice. Rice is the one food that feeds the most people in the world. There's records of 2,500 before Christ that rice was already being used. 75% of the world cultures use rice in their meal. And rice is grown in every part of the world except Antarctica. So rice is quite an important element in our cuisine. There's more than 40,000 different species of rice. So, there's a lot to select from. The rice that we use for risotto is the short grain rice. So you hear the word arborio, you hear the word carnaroli, vialone nano. These are all specific kind of they're in the same species, but they have little nuances and little differences, but all of them are for making risottos. And in Italy, which is the largest country growing rice, the largest rice-growing country in Europe, basically they grow the short grain rice. So when did rice come to Italy? Rice sort of initiated in China, Middle East, North Africa, and it crossed over into Sicily about the 700s. Sicily, if you look at the Sicilian recipe repertoire, you see rice. But rice, even though rice grows in all parts of the world, Sicily wasn't the ideal conducive terrain for rice, and rice slowly traveled up to northern Italy, and it really gained a hold in the 1200s up in Lombardy. Of course, Lombardy is the Po River that comes down from the Alps. It has all its divisions, and it's a great setting for rice. So the Po Valley, starting from Lombardy into Piemonte, is the area in Italy where rice is really grown. Vercelli, being one of the cities, is the capital of rice growing in Italy. So, what is the difference between short grain rice and long grain rice? Now, maybe I'll begin to cook so that, you get to that tasting. Rice, 1 cup of rice will yield 2 cups of risotto. It will take about 3.5 cups of liquid to get there and about 17 minutes. So the formula is not that complicated, but everything else that comes in. What's important is that you have some good stock to coax that starch out of that kernel. The stock, because rice, once it's milled, like this, rice has a brand, it's brown, it's a kernel, it's brown, and then it also has a germ. So when you look at the rice kernel, and you see almost like a chipped tooth, that's the rice that has been milled of its bran. The germ has been taken off. Germ is the food of the rice kernel, so it has fat, it has nourishment. When you have brown rice has its bran on, and it has the germ on. That's why brown rice oxidizes fast on you, because it has the germ, and it has the fattiness, and it oxidizes. So brown rice, you keep in the refrigerator, whereas regular rice keeps well 3 months with no problem. The one thing, when you buy rice and you run it through your hands, you don't want it to feel it floury. You don't want the rice kernel to have begun to open up, in a sense, lose its starches. You want a nice, dry kernel, and it has the chip. That's perfectly fine. At that point, rice has about 95% starch. So when we cook it, we need to add the flavorings every step of the way to flavor that rice. And what we get out of that rice is the texture, and it is that it absorbs the flavor, and the flavor that we impart on the starches that make the risotto creamy. So the first is to get the hot stock, and it has to be hot at the same temperature. Heat, catalyst, you have a chemical reaction going, you put another temperature, you stop that. And you do not want to do that in this cooking process. You want to continue continuously. You're coaxing up those starches, and you want to continue at the same temperature to add, so it continues. But what you do need is a wide pan, like this, so that, am I speaking too close? So that as you're coaxing that starch and adding the stock, you put it in, pulls out the starch, and it evaporates. And this process continues. So it's back and forth of pulling that out. So a wide pan with a nice thick bottom, so that this heat is spread evenly, that it reaches. if you were to do it in this pan here, you would have the rice up to here, and that rice wouldn't be at the same temperature as the bottom rice and whatever. So a nice open, and this is, a big portion. I'm going to make quite a bit of rice. If you make, a portion for 4 or 6 people, all you need is 2 cups of rice, 3 cups of rice. So you need a smaller. But that's important. A constant temperature, and I like wooden spoon, and you can get all in the corner so that the starch doesn't scorch, because then you have another flavor, another element which you don't want. So we have the pan, the olive oil. Good olive oil. Let me raise the temperature here, and you don't wash the rice before cooking. The rice is milled, the brand is off, and it is clean. In the package that you get it, it is clean, so you do not wash it, you do not introduce water, because then you begin already to break those starches down, and you don't want to do that. So some oil, you guys are going to do it on that side. Onions. I like a lot of, this is the flavor. So you can make a risotto just with onions, like the risotto milanese, that it's made with onions, but the risotto milanese has a little bit of bone marrow in it and a little bit of saffron. But you can make a simple risotto with the onion family, and then you can add the different flavorings. So shallots, and I'm going to add a little bit of salt, and if you notice as I'll go along, I'll salt as I go along. Right here, I need salt because I want to disintegrate these onions as soon as possible. I want to pull out the water in them, and of course, salt will do that. And I must say, this is fine salt. If you want to do that, the flake salt, the bigger the kernel, the more it pulls out of whatever you want, especially if you're curing meats or something. The size of the salt is important on pulling out those liquids. Okay. Here I have some, so we're going to make mushrooms. The flavor is going to be mushroom, basically. Love mushrooms. We have some porcini, dry porcini. Porcini are the boletus mushrooms. In Italy, of course, they are very much prized. But dried porcini, for me, it's an essential in my kitchen. It is one of the umamis that we have in the Italian cuisine. It has a tremendous amount of flavor concentrated. So in this case, what I'm going to do is that you did yours, right? That I'm going to take some of this stock, and this is all vegetarian today. The stock is a vegetarian stock. So for anybody, I'm going to reconstitute the porcini just like that. And then I'm going to chop them and add them on. But the porcini are also good if you have them at home, when you have them dry like that. You put them in a little food processor and you get porcini powder. And they are great for meats, for barbecues. If you have steaks, you put a little porcini, yeah? A little bit of, I put a little bit of porcini, a little bit of brown sugar. What else do we put in there?
Sugar, a little bit of chili flake, a little bit of salt. Keeping all our secrets away.
It's okay. It's okay. They'll still come and visit you. Okay, so the light went off, but you can hear me, right? I think the light, the switch jumped there. So you make this powder, and you keep it, and you season your steaks, your chops, and you leave them outside with this porcini and sugar and salt powder. Huh? Yeah. Okay. Okay, now this is on. Am I on? No? Okay, this is important. As long as the result is I can project. Okay. So I want to get those onions a little bit wilted, and then we will add the rice directly into the onions that have been already wilted. And what we're beginning to do is, to create kind of a little capsule out of this kernel. I'm going to coat it with a little bit of here, toast it first, so that the first layer of the starch, or the outside starch, kind of cooks a little bit. I say toasted, but it doesn't take on a toasty look, and doesn't even smell toasty. But sort of it's a clickety sound, a few minutes, and I have coated that kernel with oil and with a little bit, the first layer of starch that has been cooked. The addition of flavoring elements, you have 17 minutes for a risotto. So if I'm going to add the mushrooms, I'm going to add them halfway through. Sometimes I even saute them before to give them some flavor, but here we just didn't have the fires to do that. But I would recommend, if you have it, you take it, put a little bit of garlic and oil, saute them, put a little bit of thyme in there, and give them the flavor. So every element has a flavor. And then you add them on. But I'll add them about halfway through. If I wanted to do a shrimp risotto, shrimps, 2-3 minutes, they're done. I would saute them quickly, also flavor them, and then add them in the last 2-3 minutes of the risotto, so that they finish together. If you have a venison ragu risotto is delicious. The venison ragu takes about 2 hours to break down and braise and whatever. So you make that first. And then you add it about halfway. Once the rice is already releasing some starches, it takes in the ragu and it finishes that way. Okay. So I'm going to take 1/3 and 2/3 is yours. Okay. Also, if you take a look at rice, at the kernel of rice, and you look at it, you will see an opaque center. It's the liquore, and what that is, that will give me an indication. Yeah, but this is really fine tuning. How big that pore is, that center, how packed the starches are. So in the center it has a lot of, so the wider that center is, the more of the packed starches are. And the chances that the rice will maintain its shape. So what the ideal risotto is, that the rice remains, it's thoroughly cooked, but it's al dente. Al dente is a word to describe a sensation, a feeling, that for Italians, when they bite into their pasta or into their risotto, the resistance against us Italians like that little resistance in the mouth. But it's not just the Italian. Think about yourself. You love texture. You love, celery has to be crunchy. Asian pear, nice and crunchy. So, an element in cooking and in creating sensation is that tactile. We always talk about flavor and aromas and taste and so on, but the tactile element of food is very important. And I think because it just sensitizes our receptors here, more or less, and gets them kind of excited about enjoying food. So al dente for an Italian is imperative for pasta and risotto. So I'm looking, it's being tested, it's toasting slowly. So I said that rice has 95% starch, and it's it's not tasty as it is. It's starchy, as a matter of fact. So you have to kind of season it. So at this point where it's nice and dry, and when it's thirsty, you put white wine. And wine, I always get, what kind of wine? A good wine, a wine that you would drink. A wine that you have some left over. Just don't do cooking wine. Cooking wine has all kinds of seasoning and salts and all kind. And at this point, nice and dry, you hear that sizz, and what's happening is that the rice is taking it in. So when you're cooking with wine, you want the acidity, you want the flavor. The alcohol dissipates in 10, 15 minutes. The alcohol will have dissipated, and the rice will be balanced on the inside. So when you eat that rice, it has flavor, it has the acidity, and it has some of the flavor of wine. And then it'll take on the flavor of everything else. But at this point, I want to bring the rice again down completely to a dry level before I add the stock. So that's all. You don't need any more time. This is, so they're great in soups. I told you how to make the marinade or for the meat. Porcini mushroom, great in soup, great in braising, great in roasting. You know, when you're roasting a piece of meat and you put your celery and carrots and whatever, put some porcini mushrooms in there, and they're really fantastic. Cut them up. So be careful because they do tend to have a little bit of sand or earth because, you know, they are from the earth, and the stem usually maintains some of that. So I will, you can strain it through a cheesecloth or a clean rag, but I will just kind of pour and leave a teaspoon at the bottom with the desk. You guys have already divided it, right? Did you use wine? Did you?
We had wine.
You added wine?
Yeah, we had more mushrooms.
Okay, no, I'm okay with the mushroom. So, okay. So here it is. It's nice and dry. I'm going to throw this in. This is really going to give the flavor. So if I were to do this with vegetables, all kinds of vegetables, string beans and squash and whatever, let me just add this and then I'll get back to the vegetables. So you add enough stock. You see, always make sure that you scrape everything off. And a little much more stock. Okay. And always, you see me scraping off the sides, because if it stays up there, some kernels will not be cooking at given the same time. So I'm always trying to get everything in there, cooking at the same time. Just enough liquid to kind of, when you press like this, you see the bottom, but not that much. And again, you know, if you're doing in chemistry or whatever, you put ingredients together in a liquid, they'll try to neutralize each other. Pull everything out of one so it combines. And this happens here as well. You say, okay, you're going to stay there 18 minutes and you're going to stir. Just, you know how much it takes. Put all that liquid in there and go and do your chores. But it doesn't happen because the technique, you know, it's not that kind of pulling out of the starches, retaining the kernel whole, and yet a creamy risotto. Because if I put all of this, the rice will open up. Will open up, and I'm sure that you had that experience where you eat this mushy rice and the heart is not cooked yet. And that's exactly what happens. Too much liquid. All at once in the, okay. So now that's going. I'm gonna put the juice, I'm not gonna waste this. And as I said, you see the sand on the bottom. And I'm gonna just toss this away. Mushrooms, we have here, this is, what is the king? King trumpet is delicious. It's a delicious mushroom. It's an expensive mushroom, but it's a delicious mushroom. It's in season. It's as close as it gets to porcini for me. This is the hen mushroom. This is cremini. You know better than I do. Cremini and chanterelles, whatever the mushrooms, the more diversified, the better it is. But can you make it only with champignons and cremini? Of course. Substitute a little bit more of the dry porcini, which will give you really that kind of mushroom feeling, and you are on your way. So let's return to those vegetables. And everybody loves, evermore, I myself, a vegetable risotto. But I like my vegetables to kind of break down in the risotto, but I also like to have a little crunch. So I split it in half. I throw half in like I do the mushroom and let that half cook and cook. And then the other half that I want just to remain and crunchy. So it's a question of, just timing. It's like, dancing. You do those steps, and then you do the other steps, and then together it looks good. So you do that. And I taste as you go along. I always say, I even taste like, let me taste this. Okay, it's flavorful, but doesn't have any salt, and that's fine, because I know what to do here now. So when you're cooking, you have a fabulous apparatus here. You really do. It knows your whole history of what you like, what you didn't like, what you ate, what you didn't, how much salt you like. It's all in here. So use it to tell you. Taste as you go along. Salt, if you have a recipe and you don't know, how to gauge yourself with salt, let me first. Okay. Let me add a little bit more stock. How you guys doing? Okay? Okay, did you put your porcini in? Okay. So when you go to Italy, you go look for Jason and tell him, I want one of those risottos or whatever you want. He hangs around. Where do you hang around mostly, Jason?
All over, everywhere.
You're all over. They can find you all over the place. Okay. So, a little more salt. I'm going to add salt because I've salted the onions, but I didn't salt the rice and the liquid that I put so far. When you have a recipe and you say, okay, I believe in salting every product at its optimal time, when it really takes in the salt. So if you throw all the salt in the onion in the beginning, yes, it's okay, it dissipates, but this is better. You're dividing it. You take whatever the recipe tells you. Let's say it says one teaspoon of salt like that, and you put it on the side. Do I have a little spoon? Well, whatever. You put it on the side, and then from here, you salt every step of the way. Every major ingredient, salt, rice, stock. And when you come down to the end, the recommended salting of that recipe, you know that you've been using it. Always leave a little bit, because then you taste your apparatus here, and you add if you feel you need it or not. Okay. So you can see that, this is, a big pot. The center is here. I am moving it around. The center does stick a little more, and I make sure that I address that so if you're doing a wide pot and make sure, sometimes when I'm at home, I even move the pot a little here, a little there, you have to distribute the heat evenly. And, what temperature do you cook your risotto? Certainly not at maximum. You cook it so that everything continues, that this reaction that's happening continues at the same speed. That, as you can see, that the stock evaporates, the flavor of the stock remains there, but at the same time, it pulls out the starches. And so it continues. Okay. So at this point, mushrooms are quite resilient, and they're just clean and cut. I don't believe in washing in a lot of water, because mushrooms absorb water in a porous. So sometimes if you cut off the base, the dirt very well, and then you take a wet towel and you clean them off. Usually that works well. So I'm going to put my mushrooms in. You guys? No, they have their own. They've made many risottos. They have their own. They have their own rhythm, but I'm just checking. Okay. So I have here a little pepper. I like that. But pepper has tannin. It's a seed. And it's a seed that has its flavor, but it also has tannins, party woods. And if you cook it, the more you cook it, there's a bitterness that comes out. That's why you see the pepper mill on the table. It's not because, initially, they wanted to look good and serve you. It's because it just makes sense. You add pepper for maximum and purest flavor of black pepper is to add it the last minute, not to really cook it. Maybe a few minutes before, but not to overly cook it. So I have it there, and I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to salt a little bit the mushrooms, not too much, and continue the cooking process. So this continues back and forth until So here we have the long grain rice, the Uncle Ben, and the difference in it. I just put it there because they show here they have the Carnaroli, the Arborio, and the different rice to cook. When you use rice, because rice has certainly many uses. We use it in Italy a lot for soups, especially vegetable soups. Just is that extra. We use also pasta. We do tubettini or whatever we put in the soup. But rice, if you do use it for your soup as well as pasta, you boil it in the soup. You don't make a whole pot of soup, put the rice, and then put it away, and then you pull in your reheat it. The rice and the pasta should be cooked in that soup before serving. It should not be. The one option that you have is that you cook the rice maybe separately in water or in even pasta, and you leave it on the side, and then when your guest comes, you leave it a little bit al dente, you just add it the last minute, and then you serve it. The risotto, when my grandmother always used to say, if you're not home to eat the risotto when it's finished, the risotto will wait for you at the door. That means, that just it grows and grows and grows. and so it becomes thing. But also, a risotto, you say, okay, all of this now, can I prepare myself? Can I do something in advance instead of standing here and trying? I think if you do it at home and you have your guests or your family, that it's a beautiful thing to do because you can converse like I do with you. You can have some of the kids mixing it or whatever, and the aromas, and you look like a great chef. But if you want to prepare some, certainly the mise en place, as we call it in our industry, the preparation of everything, cutting everything, that's permissible. The only part of the risotto that you can do ahead is that you toast them, and you add the wine and you dry it back. And then you spread it and you leave it. But still, it loses something because then it's cold. It has congealed to some extent, the starches, and then you have to bring it back to life, bring it back to. So I think if you're seeing up there, do you see how the liquid is getting? Is it too much light? Can you see the creaminess of the rice? Risotto, the one thing that's good about the risotto is that, you can make one pot and it would feed a substantial amount of people. But, you have to serve it as soon as you make it. And, risotto as well as pasta, one is concerned ever more, starches, so much starches today, everybody. You just kind of change the ratio of your vegetables, your proteins, and your pasta. Instead of having 80% pasta, 20% vegetable, you can have 1/3 vegetable, 1/3 proteins, and 1/3 pasta. Who says you can't? And you can get the satisfaction and the pleasure, and you're balancing your meal. And you can do the same with risotto. Add more vegetables and proteins. The last step in coming along. Good. Did you taste it? Is it salty? Is it where? Where are you? Did you guys taste everything? Yeah? How about you? Did you taste yours? I opened my first restaurant. Maybe I'll share a little bit about my. I opened my first restaurant in '71. I was rather young, so it's been a long road in restaurants for me, and I love it. I still have a good time, as you can see. And along the way, those restaurants and all the restaurants that we have now in Italy and all of that, one of the great pleasures is precisely working with young people that are enthusiastic, that are passionate, that are sweating over those stoves. And I think to myself, why are you doing it? I did it because I had to do it in a sense, and I loved it. But for me, and ever more, as you grow into your profession and you kind of develop this collection of information and maybe knowledge, to share it, to cook with them, to work with them, it is really wonderful, and it's not that I have time now to go and everywhere. And plus, I have this Achilles tendon. So if you saw me hopping around, my Achilles tendon is ripped a little bit. So it's a pleasure to work with you guys. I work with them on and off, but now especially. But I come from a part of Italy that is no longer Italy. I was born in Istria. Istria is a little peninsula. It was Italy. And after World War II, it was given to communist Yugoslavia. And 350,000 ethnic Italians actually left Istria back into Italy and into the world. I was just born 1947, I'll tell you my age. And that was just I was born, I think, 3 or 4 weeks before the peace treaty. So my mother was expecting me. They decided not to go anywhere. Where are you going to go in the world with expecting? But I was born, and the Iron Curtain went down. And so my formative years, I spent with my grandmother, who remained there under communism. And the beauty of it was that, still is, that my grandmother, because food was scarce, was not all that available. The regime, the Iron Curtain went up, the regime was tight, and she had everything to feed the family. We had chickens, we had rabbits, we had 2 goats, every year she had 3 pigs, and she grew everything. We made olive oil, Grandpa made a little bit of wine, we even grew our own potatoes. I remember, going with her to harvest the potatoes from the earth. And she would pluck, because, it's a bush. She would pick it all up, take the big potatoes off the roots. Mine was to collect the little ones that was left in the dirt. And I still recall holding the potato in my hand. It was warm. It was warm as it had life. And, I can't get that out of that connection of food out of my system. The appreciation that we should have, and my connection to food. So I worked with her, I cooked with her. We used to have beans, eat them when they were string beans. They got bigger, we shelled them. That was for the winter. Even wheat, the kernels, she would harvest, and we would have the kernels. She would keep them in the cantina, as we said. And when she needed flour, we would take 2, 3 burlap bags, go to the mill, come back with fresh flour. Now, the flour was quite different because those kernels had the germ. You remember I was talking about the germ? Had the germ. And so it had more flavor, more nourishment, and more, sometimes you think, why today the flavors are different? Why? And it's those memories, collecting that cherry, that fig, that perfect fig. It would hang, and it had almost like stretch marks on its skin. And it had like a drop of honey on the bottom, nectar. I mean, I still remember. I go back, and I still look for those figs. So I think that, that connection to food and to flavors stayed with me. And in 1956, my parents decided, I was 9-something, that they could no longer. My mother was an elementary school teacher, my father a mechanic, and they just couldn't continue to raise. And I have a brother that's older than me. So they decided that they were going to go back to Italy. But they didn't give you permission to go back to Italy. You had to stay there. You couldn't get a visa or something. But we had family on the other side. So my mother decided that my brother, myself, and her would go to visit Aunt Nina, supposedly who was ill. And my father had to remain as a hostage, in a sense. But 2 weeks later, he escaped, actually, the border, the barbed wire, and the whole thing, met us in Trieste. And in Trieste, we stayed with our cousins, but also we stayed in Trieste. We couldn't depend and stay on another family's weight, as we called it. My parents entered a political refugee camp, San Saba. Now it's a museum. And for 2 years, we were in that camp. And again, in that camp, awaiting for a possibility to migrate someplace. So, when you talk about migration today, it's, for me, it's very moving, and I really feel what that meant. And there we were for 2 years, and there, almost like today. Where did we go for lunch today? We went to the freshmen's in line. I was in camp also, in line, waiting for food. But when you have these connections to food, really visceral from one to the other, it just stayed with me. And it just, food for me is, because when we left there, I didn't know that we were not going to come back. And I had not said goodbye to my grandmother or to her. So food was my memories. I would cook the flavors, the things that Grandma taught me, and they remain my connection to her and to the place where I was born. And I continued that. I did go back. I did see Grandma after I was married, so that was settled. But for me, at that age, because in 1958, Dwight Eisenhower was the president. We had a visa, and we came to the United States. The Catholic Relief Services brought us here because we had nobody here either. We were kind of, There's the salt missing. It is. But we're almost there. Are you guys almost there? Did you taste the salt? Yeah? Okay. You will tell me if they didn't. So the last step in a risotto is the mantecare. Mantecare is sort of the whip. And you do that. Some great cheese, Grana Padano cheese. I love it, that cheese there. 100% cow's milk cheese. It's in Emilia-Romagna and Lombardy. And cubes of butter at room temperature. So when you have products like this, like butter or cheese, these are products that are almost finished. And the more you cook them, the more you lose their flavor. If you cook with butter from the beginning, had I put all this, it would have separated. I would have gotten all the fat. The flavonoids, the nice aroma would have dissipated, and I would have gotten maybe half of the value in flavor of that butter. So if you love butter, but you don't want to use it that much, add it at the end. At the end, the last moment, just let it, you'll get the maximum of the flavors, the flavonoids, and everything, and it will not separate it. Cheese is sort of a pre-digested product because the bacteria of the cheese itself that's what aging cheese is all about. Breaks down the proteins into this wonderful kind of molecules of cheese with all its aroma. If you cook it, if you apply heat, you get the string and the puddles of fat, I'm sure, when you cook cheese, because you are breaking it down further. So you want it, this is maximum for cheese and butter, and mantecare is the last step when you will take it off the fire, or just shut the fire, and whip it in the last minute, and you'll get the maximum one, the other. And then just a little bit of scallions, just a little greenness to freshen up this complexity of flavors. How are yours, guys? At what point are you? Huh? You know? Yeah, but it does. I wouldn't kid you. It's missing. I'm talking too much. It's sticking a little bit. So I'm looking. So risotto, sometimes people prefer it nice and dense. Means only being careful of, towards the end, how much liquid you add. and let it evaporate, and the risotto is nice and dense. In Italy, we like it also loose, and it's called all'onda, to the wave. And that's, again, you see now it's kind of looser. It's just a question of gauging the liquid towards the end, but not overcooking it. And all'onda risotto usually is best with lighter, with seafood, with light vegetables. And the denser risotto is maybe better with meats and game and so on. Yeah? I'm on the cusp with salt. I'm neither here nor I don't know. But I'm going to add the cheese, and cheese has a little salt. Always, because once it's in there, you can't get it out. You know, by the way, I get that question a lot, you know. I always salted my soup and whatever. It's not much that you can do except dilute it, add more liquid. Sometimes what works is if you take potatoes, whole potatoes, raw potatoes, you peel them and you throw them whole in the soup, and they will take some of the salt away. But, you know, once you have over-salted something, it's not easy to go the other way around, unless you just dilute it with more of. So pretty soon, we're gonna let you taste that, and then we'll open it up to questions, and we'll have some more fun. Do you have your cheese and your butter? You got it in already? Oh. Good. And I think it's cooked. I think you can shut it off and mantecare your okay. So I'm going to shut it off. And so, you know, you're looking at this, oh my God, all this butter. I'm not going to put it all in, but you saw just the oil is in there. There's a lot of rice here. I think I started maybe with 4 or 5 or 6 teaspoons of oil. So there's not a lot of condiment, and you have a lot of starch here and mushrooms. So this is the mantecare process. Okay, I think. So like this, the last, you just maximize. I feel the butter, and you know, and I'm trying to make it quick because this is how you lose it. You know, when you cook it, it goes away. But and the cheese. Off. I turned it off. Once I started with the butter, it's off. I just keep it here because it's underneath, you see it, but it's off. I have no more tasting spoon. This is it. All right. You have the, so you need the,
Yeah, we'll take it.
okay, so they'll portion it off and you'll taste it and you'll tell me what you think.
So thank you
So
very
I'm
much for
gonna go
coming,
up
and
and
let's
sign
thank
this.
Lidia one more time.